right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all so much for joining me for today's episode. This is a standard question we've got. Well, it's not a standard question. It's a audio question, which, as you all know, standard questions go to the tippity top of the list. This is a question and answer based podcast. If you have questions about OCD and anxiety stuff, give me an email. Go to fearcastpodcast.com. You can send me a message there by clicking on the submit a question link. You can send a message. You can send an audio message by clicking on the speak pipe button. You can also go to Instagram. You can send me a message over there. I am Fearcast Podcast over yonder. And you can send me a DM, click on the little microphone button, record your voice, and it will get to me. And this is how Frank got his question into me today. Now, as we've talked about, I will read every question. I will consider every question. And every question has a certain level of confidentiality. And I don't know if this is Frank's real name. Y'all don't know if this is Frank's real name. Only Frank knows if this is Frank's name. But you can send me these questions and call yourself whatever you would like. But the voice questions, the audio questions go to the top of the list because they're fun, they're interesting, they're real people. They're not just audio or having to listen to me yammer on about it. So if you would like your question answered, send it in. And I don't think there's a line right now, y'all. I'm going to have to go back to the text questions, the emailed questions, and that is fine because we've got a backlog there as well. But this is a great question. He is sending a question in as a repeat questioner, which is allowable. It is allowable since there's a little bit of twist on this one. I think it is interesting. I think it's worth talking about. But send in your questions. Now, for those of you who are buckling up to go to the conference this year, I hope everyone's looking forward to it. I got my flight. I got my hotel. I got everything. I'm going. It's going to be great. I'm excited. I'm nervous. As always, I'm nervous. For those of y'all know, I don't like peopling very much. I'm not a peopling person. I know that's kind of weird to say as a therapist, but it's like I can therapy, but it's like the peopling. Ugh, so many people. And I have to like go and try to, I don't know, not be a goon or a weird person. I don't know, all that stuff. So I'm going to get my conference nightmares. I'll share them if there are any weird ones or fun ones that I have. I know I'm going to have them a little bit in advance, but I know I'm going to have them afterwards, and probably for about 6 months. But I'm not speaking, which is a little easier, so less pressure, but you know, brains work. I'll still get them. It's going to be super fun. I'll keep you updated. But for those of you who went to the OCD SoCal conference, so it was like kind of the mini conference we have down here, the speaker series, I hope it was great. It hasn't happened yet. I'm recording in advance of that. I am speaking on. I'm speaking with my colleague Mary Neustetter. We were talking about religious and moral scrupulosity. I'm super excited to talk about that. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And but if you were there and you heard us, awesome. And I hope if you didn't hear us, I hope you heard something or went to something that was helpful, that was encouraging, that was supportive, and that helps you move the can down the road. So why don't I get into Frank's question, and then I will answer it. I'll be back.
Hi, Kevin. This is Frank. I'm a repeat question asker, and last time I asked on this podcast as to whether or not ERP therapy might be good for someone that is also in denial, because my OCD theme is that I may or may not be a trans person. I am a cis gay man, but I am worried that I am in denial about possibly being trans. So you answered my question in a way that did clarify and I think did help me and empower me to like go through with ERP therapy, with me knowing that, it could help in both scenarios, so I should just go through with it. And I think ERP has helped me in some ways get my life back. But sometimes the intrusive thoughts come back and I find myself not being able to engage. Like I find myself being unable to disengage. So just to give a little bit of background, because I don't think I really did that. So I've dealt with other themes in my life. I had my first bout with this theme of whether or not I'm trans when I was about 16. And I think that it was really fear of like, oh my God, am I going to come out as something else? Am I going to come out as something else? Because it took a lot of courage for me to come out as gay. What if I come out of something else? What if these thoughts that I have where like I emulate women, or these thoughts that I have where I imagine myself in place of the female characters, but as just me in my current body, what if that's a sign? What if that means something? What if, and those thoughts, I don't know how those thoughts ended up flowing away, how that those doubts started to flow away, but they started flowing away in my early 20s when I felt like I was really coming into my own. But these thoughts ended up getting replaced with another theme. I started to worry obsessively whether or not I was a pedophile, and it all started because, well, I watched this TED Talk where I saw how someone was struggling with pedophilia, and they were worried, and how they were basically working to curb any kind of behavior that could put anyone in danger. And I thought, oh my God, what if I'm that, and what if I'm capable of hurting children in my life that I love, and that I would never do such a thing, but what if I'm capable of having those urges? So I think that really consumed my mind for a while I was in college. And now the trans theme came back. And I think it came back a bit stronger because I start worrying about, well, I'm in my late 20s. People have all sorts of revelations in their late 20s. What if that's one of them? And what if like you start actually feeling uncomfortable being a man? What if like that starts to like surface, and I start finding evidence as to see whether or not there's any evidence of dysphoria in me. And sometimes I feel like, okay, is this questioning itself that? And so that's not the main question that I'm having here though, because I know this might be a very OCD way of thinking. Whenever I think of myself as a woman, I like actually in the body of one, I feel repulsed. Like I feel my own brain like on fire, where it's like, yeah, I don't want that. I'm really comfortable in the body that I am right now, but I just have this doubt that just keeps pressing on me. Thinking back to the times in my childhood where I did something gender non-conforming, or thought something gender non-conforming, and now I'm like thinking, well, what could that mean? What could that mean? So fast forward to now. I've had some moments of introspection. I had a conversation with my partner, and I realized in that conversation that my tendency to procrastinate on things, my tendency to always leave things for the last minute, to not do things, to not take risks, is because I'm scared of failing. And I'm also scared that other people see that failure and will be mad at me and disappointed in me. And so I end up relying so much on a conviction of others. And I started to worry, oh, what if this conviction, what if I rely so much on the conviction of others that it's even affected my identity? And my brain is like latching onto the narrative like, oh, you might be trans. And so now I'm just worried. And my question is, how do you disentangle when you're actually having a moment of actual, probably valuable introspection from OCD? How do you actually disentangle that? Thank you so much for giving this platform to people that struggle with OCD and anxiety, and I hope you have a great day.
All right, Frank, thank you so much for that question. This is a great question. I know for some it was long, and you know what? I don't know whether or not I'm going to have time to clean up that audio, because I think I messed some things up, and music showed up, and there was an email sound, and anyways, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I'll try to clean that up before I put this out. But either way, so Frank, great question. I hear that concern. I hear that worry, and I think underneath that, there's some stuff that needs to be talked about, and I'm going to talk about that here today. Here's what I think you're really asking Here's what I think you're really asking. How do I know when I'm thinking right, and how do I know that I have OCD thoughts, right? How do I know? Because what did you call it? You called it valuable introspection. How do I know that I'm having valuable introspection? How do I know that I'm thinking clearly? Because if I know that I'm thinking clearly, well, I know that that's right thinking, it's trustworthy thinking. I know that if I make a decision based on what's going on right now, I know that I'm going to shoot myself straight and I'm going to send myself off into the future rightly. However, if I'm thinking OCD-wise, if there is OCD even a little bit, I'm thinking wrong. And that's going to lead to disaster. And if it's OCD, and if I can label it as OCD, then I know that it's wrong thinking so that I can have confidence and certainty that it's wrong. Maybe that's what's happening, right? I think it's important to know that like OCD is always saying, or OCD has this like sense of pressure to it, right? There's in your question, there's almost this like I need to know the answer, right? This falls. I think there's a hint of the, if not all of it, but again, I don't know a whole lot about you, Frank. This sense of like a need to know. I need to have the answer to this question. I need to find out the truth of who I am, what I am, where I'm going, what I'm doing, or else, right? There's this kind of drive to know that answer, kind of the feel, or to get to get to the bottom of it. Or maybe that feeling will never go away, or maybe I'm going to set myself up, or if I make the wrong decision, I'm going to set myself in the wrong direction, or I'm going to make this irrevocable change in my life, and that would be a horrendous disaster. And all of that drives this urge or drives this need and pulls you back into that ruminative cycle. And it almost, not even almost, it justifies that ruminative process that I bet you hate, I bet you don't want to do, and yet you do it. Why? Why would you ever do that? I think you do that because it feels necessary. It feels important, because if you don't, it's going to go bad, right? So, all right, this is not the answer to it, but generally speaking, OCD thinking and OCD processes, the compulsive cycle, has this sense of like urge, this imperativeness to it, that this answer has to be answered ASAP or else, right? Now, clear thinking doesn't always come with a sense of certainty or absolute confidence, right? Quote, clear thinking doesn't really have this sense that like, I know I'm making the right choice. A lot of times we make decisions, we're rounding up. There can be a caveat, there can be a what if, there can be a maybe, there can be this kind of doubt, this maybe uncertainty to it. So in other words, there may not be this clear delineation between OCD thinking and clear thinking, because there may always be this sense of doubt. But I think one of the things for you, Frank, to consider is how are you building trust back in yourself? How are you bringing that confidence back that you generally speaking know yourself. You generally speaking know what you're about. You generally speaking can trust the decisions that you make. Because for the vast majority of times you make pretty stinking good decisions. And there are those times that it goes bad. Because you know who makes sometimes bad decisions? Everybody, myself included. So I want to caution you as we kind of go through a little bit of this, and this won't be a tremendously long episode, but one of the things to consider is that this is where I think OCD is grabbing you, is the sense that saying you can't trust yourself, you need to trust others, right? You talked about relying on the conviction of others. I think it was an interesting way that you said that. And what I kind of heard in that is this like using other people as certainty, right? You're outsourcing the confidence that you ought to have in yourself. And instead, there's this voice that says, man, I can't trust me. I make bad decisions. Or what if I make a bad decision, right? What if I don't know what I'm about? So I need to outsource this. I need to trust the conviction of other people. And I'm hearing that as like the conviction, like other people say X is true, or X is true about me, so it must be true, right? They seem to be pretty confident about that, so therefore I can probably be confident about that too, right? Now, this would be a compulsive process, right? It's the compulsion to evaluate other people's words, what they're saying, maybe how they're saying it, maybe evaluating the feelings that they have, right? Their sense of conviction to it, right? Maybe you're checking with other people, obviously through that process. You're checking with people multiple times. Maybe you're scrutinizing their responses, right? Maybe you're asking that same question or you're asking the question and then evaluating like how you feel about it, how you feel, did it feel confident? Did it feel like they knew what they were? You get what I'm saying, right? As well as just checking your own feelings in general, right? Do I feel like I'm trans? Do I feel like I want to be in somebody else's body? Do I want to have a body that is not my own, right? Or do I want to have a body that would feel more like my own? And when I imagine that, how does that feel in comparison to this one? Does it feel better? Does it feel right? And then there's no sense of certainty. Now, I will say, you did acknowledge that when you think about that, it ain't for you, right? What is that thought process like? What does it feel like when you get to that place? Because I've talked about this before. We've talked about the what I call trusting your compulsive conclusion, right? You're defending something. You're trying to fight for something. There's something that you believe to be true about you, about your life, about yourself, your character, etc. And there's this question that's coming up that's throwing that into doubt and asking you to not believe that, or saying that you don't really know. And that's uncomfortable. And that brings you to that worry. That's part of that justification. I need to know, because what if I don't know? Well, let me get back into the thought process, right? But oftentimes you're fighting for something deep down, I think you're going like, no, this is who I am. But the OCD doubt shows up, that feeling, that urgency, that imperative that draws you towards something that does not feel like you. And that's what we call ego dystonic. It does not feel like you, but it feels anxiety provoking. It feels uncertain, and it feels scary, right? So that's that driver, right? We've also talked about that OCD isn't really a thought problem. It's a feeling problem. You have told yourself that you are not trans. You've already messaged me about that, and you've asked other people. You've checked with your partner. You've scoured your character. You've scoured your past, also compulsive. And you still feel like you are who you are, a cis gay man. And then your brain goes, but people discover stuff all the time. And boy, you're in your 20s. That's, quote, that's when people discover stuff about themselves, right? You're going to hear these little things. It's not saying, because there's not this one-to-one relationship between the thought. It's not saying, I feel this to be true, I know this to be true, therefore it is, right? It's saying, this kind of roundabout maybe, but what if, and these general rules or these general aphorisms, I think that's the right way of saying it, or these sayings that people have, maybe that's the aphorism. Point is, it's like your brain is gathering all this information and saying, well, maybe there's something you don't know about yourself, and boy, maybe it's that thing that we worried about a long time ago, right? But it's not. It's not a clear line. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, that it's this roundabout way, right? So this is the sort of stuff that ICBT gets at. And then it would get into like, what would you need to know? What would you need to believe? What would you need to have now be true or see or experience for you to have that direct line? In other words, what is it that you don't have that your brain is filling in or suggesting otherwise, right? I also had this question. I wonder if, and this has, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but I wonder if, like, watching that TED talk back in the day, I wonder if there was something about that like seeing somebody else worry about whether or not they were a pedophile, or whether or not they ought to be worried about pedophilia. I wonder if like their doubt spawned this question for yourself of like, well, they doubt, maybe I should doubt, because you trust the conviction of others, right? You're outsourcing your confidence to other people. That dude's not confident. Oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't be confident either about who I am. I should doubt. So therefore I should check. Because remember, other people know, because I certainly don't. He doesn't know, right? Just something to consider. So one of the ways to think about this is, as you're starting to build this confidence in yourself again, or try to bring a little bit of that back, I want you to start to build your awareness of when you are doubting yourself and how you are doubting yourself. So what are those other times in your life where you have these questions about yourself? Is it only around this trans question? Are there other times that it shows up, that it feels like, I need to ask somebody else. I need to get somebody else's opinion about this before I make a decision? Now, if and when that happens, I want you to start to notice when that's happening. What are the situations? Not to fix it right then and there, but to start looking for these patterns of things, right? And then what would it feel like, and what would it mean for you if you didn't ask the other person, right? If you just either didn't ask them and you made a decision yourself, or if you didn't do anything about it, would there be that fear that this feeling is never going to go away? Would it be that your world is going to crumble? Is it that you're automatically going to make these bad decisions? Right? Starting to build these patterns and to look at what the outcomes are, right? What was really coming to mind in terms of building this is looking at is considering it from the inhibitory learning model approach. And what that really does is it puts like certain specific situations to the test, where you are where you're thinking about a certain situation where you have this doubt, and you consider what are my safety behaviors? What do I do in this moment to get a sense of certainty or confidence and to be able to manage this feeling, right? So for you, it might be asking your partner, it might be checking with somebody else, it might be scouring your memories from your past, it might be evaluating your feelings, it might be really looking at other people's responses or behaviors, right? Or reflecting on past times when people have said really confident things that you could trust about who you are. And to say, you know what, rather than getting into that, I'm going to sit with not knowing. And that might look like intentionally making the decision there. It might be saying, I'm going to delay this, and instead of ruminating about this, I'm going to try to go do the dishes, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to get a redirect back and send some emails and get involved with work again, or whatever it is that you're doing or could do to try to get back to your life, right? Because what we want to try to, let me finish that. So as you do that, then afterwards, give it a day or two and say all right, how did that go, right? When I made that decision, when I delayed this, what happened? Did life blow up? Did I discover something terrible about myself? Did everything in my life change? Did I hurt other people? Did I hurt myself in that process? Or did nothing happen? Right? Did you notice that you felt anxious and uncomfortable and uncertain about things? And did that feeling eventually pass? Were you able to not get the answer and life still go on, and find yourself back to a sense of more or less confidence with yourself, right? Now we can start to see that pattern, and when you start to reflect on that arc of anxiety, you start to recognize, and hopefully you can remind yourself that this feeling, as uncomfortable it is, will eventually pass. I just need to let it pass, and I'll eventually get to the other side of it, and I can maybe make a decision then or not, right? Because not everything needs a decision. Not every decision we need to make. It will develop, or it will come, or new information will arise, and we will make new choices. But part of that, again, is building confidence, not certainty, confidence in ourselves, confidence in the world around us, confidence in our abilities to make choices, right? Not to say, I know when I'm thinking correctly, therefore I know that I can trust this. But to say, I don't know, maybe I'm going to make a bad choice. Maybe I'm going to not know the answer to this, and I'm going to see how it shakes out, right? So again, we're building trust back in yourself, right? The way that we do that is we trust ourselves over time. And we start to see in various situations, we start to see that you make pretty good choices and you know yourself pretty well. But we need to put ourselves in that situation. We need to trust ourselves in the process. And then we need to see what happens. Right. So I wanted to give you some exposure ideas, some things to think about. Obviously, response prevention is going to be the most important thing, right? Some of that may be recognizing that you have that urge, right? Remember that urge we talked about at the top of this? That, oh my gosh, I've got to figure this out right now. Well, first, recognize that that is a feeling. That's a feeling that you didn't have like 10 minutes ago. It feels like it requires this action for you to separate from the moment to go and do this or else, right? But you can sit with that. So first off, when anxiety first shows up, you can use that as a moment of exposure, because it is, right? But that's where you're saying, okay, this feeling has come, and now I'm going to sit with this feeling. And I'm going to see what it's like, and I'm going to let it be there. I'm not going to indulge it. I'm not going to make it bigger, stronger, more terrible. I'm just going to ride this feeling out and notice how it shows up in my body, how the uncertainty feels, how the urge feels to do or to check or to ruminate or to evaluate. I'm going to notice how it shifts and changes. I'm going to observe it. I'm going to notice and be curious about it, right? And we're going to let that feeling pass. Now, we've talked about on this podcast anxious drunk, all right? So, I don't know if you've ever been drunk before, but some of us have. And when you've had too much, you're not thinking very clearly. You're not your normal self. Now, you know why you're not in that normal self, because you are hammered. But what we do in that is we go, okay, I'm not thinking as clearly. I might be overwhelmed by a certain feeling. I might be disregarding certain bits of information. I might be overemphasizing other bits of information, and I might be feeling things that are odd or off, right? The alcohol, that's what you're feeling. What we don't do in that is say, this is who I am. I need to make all the decisions. We don't go like, man, I'm really hammered right now. Or I need to make a big, life-changing, big decision in my life. Better get drunk first. What do? If we are in that place, we wait. We take care of ourselves. We don't make the decision right then and there. We delay. We drink a Gatorade. We try to go to sleep. We don't keep drinking. And we eventually wake up, and eventually the booze leaves your system, and you get back to your normal, typical self. It doesn't mean that you make all the right decisions as a normal, sober person, but it certainly is better than that time that you were overwhelmed by something. Now, anxious drunk is similar. When we're overwhelmed by anxiety or depression or anger, we are not in our right state of mind, and we can kind of recognize the telltale signs of that. Again, we're looking for that urgency. We're looking for that pain, that feeling of like, I need to do this or else, and other people are not sharing this sense of urgency, or there's not this identifiable danger in front of me, like, the tiger, the snake, the cliff, the whatever it is that's in front of you. We go, okay, I might be, maybe, and this is where we're kind of trusting ourselves, I might be anxious right now. I'm going to wait. All right? Now, instead of continuing to indulge in the rumination, instead of continuing to go down that rabbit hole, instead we're going to just go, all right, I need to wait on this. I'm going to get some sleep. I'm going to not make big decisions right now. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to watch The Office. I'm going to do something fun. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do something to let ourselves get distracted. We're not suppressing this. We're saying, I know this is going to kind of float with me for a bit, but I'm not going to try to turn my attention towards it and make it my day. I'm just going to let it kind of be there as I do this other thing. And eventually that feeling will pass. And eventually you'll get back to your typical self. And then we can say, was this necessary? Was this important? And again, I think it's important that you've noticed when you get back to kind of that state, you go, that's not really who I am. Okay. Maybe you're right. Now I'll say this, maybe you're not. I don't know, right? But there's this sense where you think about it and it doesn't quite fit. Well, maybe in that, we don't need to make decisions based on things that don't feel right. We can say, you know what, maybe it's not me, maybe it will be me, but I'm going to wait on this and I'm going to ride this out. Remember, we're seeing ourselves over time. Other things you can do to intentionally sit in that, I think scripting would be really good in this moment, right? I think scripting, like some kind of stems for this or some ideas, maybe like writing a story for yourself about constantly seeking certainty from other people or you ruminating about trying to get the right answer and just never getting rid of that doubt. So in other words, you spend the rest of your life like desperately trying to get answers and that feeling never goes away, right? It might be another story, could be constantly making wrong choices, right? Wrong choices and getting worse and worse and worse outcomes in life. And in that, these stories might, and they should, make you feel uncomfortable, but it's not to say that you need to fix this or solve this. What you're saying is, I don't like not knowing. Not knowing feels uncomfortable. And that's exactly what the exposure is. It's not trying to convince yourself that you're wrong or that you should be trans or aren't trans or whatever it is. It's saying this idea makes me uncomfortable. Well, I need to get really good at being able to sit with and have this uncomfortable thought, at least for now. And the more we read that story, the more we let that story be there without trying to fix it or solve it, the more it goes away, right? Again, as the idea, like if like I'm giving a presentation this weekend, if I felt a little bit of anxiety before giving the presentation and I left and I just ran away from it, I confirmed that situation was dangerous. But if I stay and let myself be anxious and notice that as I stay, my anxiety will rise and will eventually start coming down, I show myself that I can get through that. And again, if the more I give presentations, the easier it gets, the more my brain gets the message that I can do this, this is safe, and I can trust and build confidence in that situation, that I can get through it, that I can give a presentation, and I think I give pretty decent presentations, and that all those negative outcomes are unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely. And we start to see over time, we build that confidence, not the certainty, right? I'm confident the big earthquake is not going to happen and kill everybody today. I'm confident that I'm not going to die in a car wreck today. But maybe today's the day, but maybe it's not. To that end, again, maybe I'm trans, maybe I'm not, and noticing how it sits. Now, lastly, I want to say in this process, offer yourself an exorbitant amount of compassion and encouragement in the face of not knowing the answer to this question and not knowing what you should do or whether you're in your right state of mind or not. But instead say, you know what, I sometimes make mistakes and I can make a mistake. And I'm not going to make this choice, or I am going to make another choice, whatever it is. And I'm going to see how it goes. And recognize that offering support and encouragement, when you notice that feeling of doubt or that fear is there, you can say, you know what, this isn't bad. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a broken person. This is scary and it's uncomfortable and it's hard, but it's because I have OCD and this is uncomfortable, scary, and hard, right? So you're giving yourself a little bit of support to get through this. And especially when you're starting the process of exposures to it, to be able to say, you know what, this is hard and scary and uncomfortable and all those words or whatever pirate language you'd like to use. And I can get through this and I'm going to get through this. And I'm worth the effort and I'm worth the process to get to the end of it. Because there will be moments where that voice is going to be yelling at you that this is the end of the world, that you need to know, that you need to ruminate and check and ask and outsource that reassurance from other people. You know what? We don't. And that's going to be okay. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you a different way to think about it or some encouragement and also some things to experiment with, some things to try. But I also hope that I have not answered the question about how you know you're thinking right or that you are thinking, quote, wrong or, quote, OCD. It is all thinking. It is sometimes not the most helpful thinking, but for those who don't have OCD, they also have not helpful thinking. So, best of luck. Embrace the uncertainty, resist unnecessary and unhelpful compulsive processes, and trust yourself to make decisions. And that if you make a bad decision or the wrong decision for you, that you can address it, that you can change it. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.